Hello, everybody. We're back with another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. I'm Mario Sikora, along with my colleague TJ Dawe here. We are going to be talking about not a movie this time, but an episode of a TV show that we think captures the preserving eight really well. TJ, tell us about the topic today.
We're gonna talk about season 1, episode 3 of The Last of Us, the popular HBO show set in a post-apocalyptic zombie world. So in this particular episode, which famously stars Nick Offerman, just to set the scene, there's a mutated fungus that has infected most of humanity, turning them into zombies, and the few survivors are surviving any way they can. The season premise is that one of the adult survivors, named Joel, played by Pedro Pascal, is protecting teenager Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey, helping her on a cross-country journey to get from Massachusetts to, I believe it's somewhere in Wyoming, to get her to medical researchers who want to study her unique immunity to this fungal infection. This particular episode is titled Long, Long Time, focuses on two characters who are only in this episode. So the main character is Bill, played by Nick Offerman, who's a Doomsday prepper who survives the apocalypse just fine. And we see the day that everything came crashing down, and then we see what he did then. Then we cut ahead 3 years, in which he finds a man named Frank, played by Murray Barlett, who people might remember from season 1 of The White Lotus. He's just a random guy who's fallen into a hole on Bill's land. And Bill initially, after trying to send him on his way, changes his mind, feeds him, clothes him, and then the two get together. And they end up living together in a loving relationship for the 20 years that this one episode spans. And the relationship only ends when Frank contracts a degenerative disease, which is never named. My guess is that it's multiple sclerosis. And after a certain point asks to be euthanized, which Bill does, and euthanizes himself at the same time. And they die in bed together.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is fine. And by the way, folks, if you are a fan of the Enneagram in a Movie, you know that we give away the endings of things, and we will continue to do so. So be prepared. All right.
Yeah. Spoilers aplenty in every episode.
Yeah.
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on?
You haven't seen the world, so you don't know. Keep going for family.
I'm not family.
No. You're cargo.
Why are you so important?
Somewhere out west, they're working on a cure. I think what really impressed them was the fact that I didn't turn into a monster.
If she so much as twitches, don't.
It's okay.
If I'm taking you with me, do what I say when I say it. You got any advice on the best way west?
Yeah, go east. You come this far, then you know what's out there.
You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him?
You have a greater purpose than any of us could have ever imagined.
Be careful who you put your faith in.
You might not be her father, but you're someone's.
Trust me.
Every so often, there is something on television that restores the heart and faith in humanity. And for me, this episode was one of those. I was so moved by this episode. I mean, I think this, I don't know, it's hard to judge what the great episodes all time of television are. There's a couple episodes of The Bear season 2 that jump out to me as, unlike other things on TV. I'd put this episode in top 5 from my experience. I don't know, what was your thought about the episode in general, TJ?
Completely agree. I loved it when it first aired, and then I loved rewatching it for this podcast. And Nick Offerman got an Emmy for his guest appearance on this, and deservedly so. He gives an incredible performance.
Yeah,
I was a fan of his already, and I loved him in this.
Yeah,
we saw some new stuff.
Yeah, and unexpected, right? I mean, and a complex character. I think particularly the Nick Offerman character was a complex character and really, really captured the preserving 8 and some of the complexities we see in humans, particularly human 8s, particularly human preserving 8s. So it's hard not to think about preserving when we think about The Last of Us in general, right? I mean, that's what it's all about, is how do we survive? How do we, manage not to get turned into one of these zombie-like creatures? How do we, manage not to get killed by marauders? How do we find food? How do we protect ourselves, etc.? How do we fight off disease? And I would say that the Pedro Pascal character, who's the main character, at least in the first 2 seasons, is probably also a preserving 8. Right. And so in a way, him and the Bill character have an awful lot in common. And they're not friends, but they're grudging respecters of each other. Okay. Let's start with the type 8 striving to feel powerful. TJ, what was 8-ish about the Bill character in this show?
For one thing, intensity. So in the scene when it shows all the shit coming down, Bill is ready for it. And then as soon as the army has evacuated everybody that lives in the town that he lives in, he seems to actually be enjoying himself. Here's this, he's a doomsday prepper. So here's what he's been getting ready for in his mind and in his body and in his home for years. And now it's happening. But there isn't this sense of like, oh shit, it's actually happened. There's a sense of like, oh shit, it's actually happening. So there's this kind of zeal. There's this relish as he's gathering supplies. He breaks into a Home Depot to get all the hardware he needs. He's got the tools and the strength to access any environment he wants to. He goes to the liquor store and he gets cases of wine. He's eating a meal at his table and through security cameras sees footage of a zombie walk into one of his own traps and get shot in the head. And he says, "Ho, doesn't get old."
Yeah. That for me, because, it's funny because up to that point, I'm thinking, could one make the case that this is a 6, right? But that scene nailed that it's an 8. Right. It was just, and I'll say that the line reading you gave strikes me as a little different than the line reading he gave. Right. Because he was just kind of, that never gets old. It was, it was a bit more understated. Right. And it was just, you could just see it was this genuine, that's pretty cool, right? And there's some things at the end too that I think reinforce that. We'll get to that, but all right. So go ahead, continue with what made this character an 8 for you.
So there's that. There's a bunch of stuff we'll get to when we talk about preserving and preserving 8 specifically. But another specifically 8 thing, tenderness. So again, this is the cloaked tenderness that we'll sometimes see in 8s and that we talked about in the Godfather Part 2 episode. But his initial impulse with this guy, Frank, who's an interloper, is to not trust him and to send him on his way and to tell him why. And then he changes his mind.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just give him some scraps and send him on his way. He invites him into his home and gives him new clothes and gives him a shower, which you're very aware of, what a rare thing that must be 3 years into a zombie apocalypse to have a shower with hot water for as long as you want. And he falls in love with this guy and just opens himself to him. And one of the moments when that's happening is when Frank notices that Bill has a really nice piano and goes through the sheet music in the bench and pulls out a Linda Ronstadt song, long, long time and plays it. And then Bill kind of,
no.
enough of that."
Yeah.
And then sits down and plays and sings it himself.
Right. In a very different way.
And it's not Metallica.
Yeah.
It's not Johnny Cash. It's not
Right.
anything stereotypically 8-ish.
Right.
It's Linda Ronstadt.
Yes.
It's tender. It's a love song. Yeah. And yet he embodies it in a tough way.
Yeah.
In a way of like, I'm tough and tender at the same time,
Yes.
which to me is the quintessence of 8.
Yeah. It was such a vulnerable moment, right? And but not a weak moment. And that's the difference, right? That's what the tenderness in strength looks like in an 8, is I can be vulnerable, but don't mistake this for weakness, sort of quality. And when Frank played the song, it was more like an upbeat, kind of energetic approach to it. And Bill, you could tell Bill was offended by this approach, right? And he said, no. And he kind of took him aside, and then he sits down. And again, it was just this soft, intense, heartbreaking version of this, very sad song when you listen to the words to it. So filled with longing. All right.
And not performative. It's not, listen to my amazing singing voice.
Right.
Check out my skill at the piano.
Right.
It was pure emotion.
Yeah.
His singing voice isn't that great. I mean, it's not bad.
Right.
But the emotion comes across, and that's how he plays, and that's the level that he enjoys playing and singing it on.
Yeah.
Both for himself, you get the sense, as well as for a guest.
Yeah. Yeah. The other, let's see, I don't know if we want to jump ahead to this or not, but I'll do it anyway. I think the other thing that really stood out as 8-ish to me was at the end in the letter that he wrote. When Frank asks to be kind of euthanized, right? Says, okay, this is the last day. I want to die now. And, Bill agrees to it. But Bill, also takes the overdose, and he's going to die too. They leave a letter, and they assume that, I'm drawing a blank on the main guy. Joel. Yeah, they assume that Joel is going to be the one who finds the letter, because anybody else would have been blown up because they didn't know the code, right? So, and he tells him, I'm going to read this because I thought it was so good in capturing it. So in the letter he says, "I never liked you, Joel, but it's like we're friends, and I respect you. I hated the world, and I was happy when everyone died when this happened. But I was wrong, and there was one person worth saving, and that's what I did. That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. I leave you all of my weapons and equipment. Use them to keep Tess safe." Right? Now, of course, Tess had died by this point, and that causes Joel to break down and make Ellie stop, reading, and, he leaves and all that stuff. But it's this sort of protective, and yet, look, I don't really like you. It's this candid, direct, I don't like you, but, I respect you. And respect is a huge thing for 8s. I think this is something that might not get talked about enough, right? 8s respect, maybe it does, but 8s respect a good combatant, right? They respect strength in others. They respect people that'll stand up to them. There's that scene where they're having lunch together, where Joel and Tess first show up to have lunch with Bill and Frank, and Bill's got the gun there, right? Sitting on the table. So even though they're having this lunch together, Bill's ready to shoot them, and so Joel's kind of, talking him through and having a normal sort of conversation. And then he says, "So get that fucking gun out of my face." Right. And again, it's these two 8s establishing their territory, their ground rules, not in a combative, threatening sort of way. It's just, dude, I know this is your place. Get the gun out of my face, this sort of thing. So there's a lot of clarity there that 8s can bring to these kind of encounters.
Yeah, you're the real thing. And I get that.
Yes.
And because they're both preserving 8s, they don't want to take what each other has.
Yes.
It's like, you got your thing going. I respect that. I got my thing going. I respect that. Can we trade?
Yes.
Can we have a mutually beneficial relationship?
Yes.
If the answer is no, I will accept that.
Yes.
I'm not going to force you because I know that's a fool's errand.
Yes.
And I don't want that anyway.
Yeah, and that's something that Bill says to Joel during that encounter. We're self-sufficient here. We don't need you or anyone else, right? And then Joel listens to that, and then he says, yeah, but you know what? That wire is going to break down in a year or two, and then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. And again, Bill doesn't get defensive about it. He kind of takes it in, and he says, okay, yeah, well, good point, right? I mean, they don't show him saying that, but he does make the upgrades, and they do establish this relationship based on this kind of mutual benefit that you're talking about, and respect, if not, affection for each other.
And he fortifies that wall with junked cars. Like years later, we see that same place where Joel had identified.
Right.
Like this could come down, and it's like a barricade of junked cars. That like, how the hell did he do that? But of course he did, because he's a preserving 8 and he's handy and he's motivated.
That's the other thing you see. So when I interview people, particularly clients, one of the questions I ask them is, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? And almost every preserver has hobbies that are kind of related to the home in some way, fixing things, decorating things, building things, tending to things, caring for things. So you see lots of, gardening and woodwork and, home repair. Right. Now, when you ask navigators if they do that stuff, they all say, they're all sheepish and embarrassed. And no, I don't really do that kind of stuff. I should. My wife would, really like me to do more of that, but it's just not my thing. But navigators, and we see this kind of handiness in Bill that is often very related to, preservers in general, but preserving 8s in particular, right? This competence, this, I know what the challenges are. I know what is needed to build and protect my castle, and I'm going to do it.
And this is my home base.
Yes.
That's coming out on 2 levels, both of which I think are correct, which is this is my base of operations.
Yes.
But the preserving realm in general is my home. Not that this character knows about the Enneagram and would think of it in that way. But it's like how some people would, and I know people like this, who would walk into a garage full of tools and know exactly how to use them and know exactly what they wanted to do with them. Or another person might walk into a well-stocked kitchen and have the exact same reaction of like, I can make this with this, and this is better than what I have, and ooh, what's this made of, and that kind of thing. This sense of like, yes, the preserving realm is my turf. This is where I love it. This is what I think about all the time. This is where I thrive. And that is very much Bill.
Yeah. And, so we're kind of transitioning here from the 8ness to the preserving, right? And so, when we think about the preserving, this whole episode is about preserving, right? He is, so we think of preserving as nesting and nurturing at its heart, right? So how do I build my nest? How do I protect myself from predators? How do I protect myself from the elements from disease, all this other sort of stuff? And how do I create this nest that is both safe and comfortable and pleasant and satisfying? Okay. And if I don't have to, I don't really want to leave it. Right? I mean, I'll go out there, I'll go see the world, take a vacation, whatever. But, I am at my best and I am happiest when I am in my nest. And that was Bill for sure, right? So just this building this fortification and really taking joy. I mean, like you said, he's gleeful when he's left alone, right? He realized, man, I'm like the Omega Man, right? Right? The old Charlton Heston movie, right? I am the last man standing, and I love it. I am not sad that everybody disappeared. And I saw this during COVID with a lot of preservers, right? Where it was like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. I don't have to leave. I can get, I got all my stuff. I got plenty of toilet paper. I got my Lysol. I can wipe stuff down, what more could I want? And a lot of transmitters were actually pretty happy during COVID as well, right? It was the navigators who really, really struggled during COVID because I couldn't get out there and interact with people. Right? So the whole thing about the nest was very preserving. You've talked about fixing things, building things. Go ahead.
And the fact that he's got his base of operations within the house, the scene when it all comes down, is he's kind of in the command center,
Yeah.
which is beneath the basement.
Yeah.
So he's sitting, he's got a bank of screens from all his different security cameras. He's watching them all, and he hears one of the army people say, there's nobody in here. We're in the basement.
Yeah.
So it's like he's beneath the basement, and when we see him emerge from it, there's this elaborate piece of furniture on top of the, like you would not find this unless you were really, really looking for it.
Right.
So he must have dug out a sub-basement and wired it all together and, supplied it with all of his stuff.
Yeah.
Which is just so preserving as well as preserving 8.
Yeah. And to your point, he was this prepper. I mean, he didn't build this. This didn't come up once the whatever it was, a pandemic or, whatever they referred to it as, no, he didn't say, hey, I got a week to throw all this together. No, man, that took a long time to get ready. He was prepared for the apocalypse and had been preparing for it for a long time. Now, again, not every preserver is going to be preparing for, the zombie apocalypse. Not every preserver is going to be skillful at using tools and being organized and being that self-sufficient. But they're going to think about those things, right? They're going to think about that stuff. Again, a difference between a bias and skillfulness in those things that we are biased toward. He also just happened to be very, very capable at those things.
My partner is a preserving 4. And we pieced this together because as a preserving 4, that's not the demographic that you would expect, preserving 4 women in particularly, that something like The Last of Us or post-apocalyptic stories in general would be targeted at. She loves them. There's not one book or TV series or movies set in a post-apocalyptic setting that she hasn't been glued to, even though it terrifies her. And we live in an apartment. We don't have a bunker.
Right.
We don't have a storeroom full of supplies, but she thinks about it a lot. And every post-apocalyptic story is, as you mentioned before, about preserving.
Yeah.
How do I get food? How do I get water? How do I maintain my physical health? How do I survive? How do I keep off marauders, whether they're raiders or zombies or what have you? It's like, welcome to the territory of a preserver.
Right.
Some part of their mind is kind of always going on that.
Yes.
Of like, do I have what I need?
Yes.
If I do, what if it goes away?
Yes.
How do I deal with that?
Yes. Yes. There's also this pleasure in the preserving things, right? Now, number one, when he was doing the work, of preserving, he seemed to be enjoying it, right? If I have to go put up fences and drag, burned out cars to, fortify a fence or something, I would do it, but I'm going to hate every minute of it, right? And I'm going to put it off as long as I can. He seemed to be enjoying doing that kind of stuff. There was also, he was a gourmet chef, right? So, here he is living in the apocalypse, and he's eating rabbit paired with Beaujolais, right? And there's the scene where Frank says to him, somebody who's sophisticated enough to know that Beaujolais goes with rabbit, kind of thing. So, so again, it was just this attention and love of the preserving things.
And not only the fresh killed rabbit, and we don't see that, he doesn't say it, but the implication is the fresh meat that he's eating, he's hunted or trapped.
Yes, yes.
As well as at the beginning, you see him gather up some chickens and you see he's slaughtered a pig. So like he's capable with all of these things. There's always fresh vegetables on his plate.
Yes.
That he is gardening.
Yes.
And he's got that awareness of like, as tough of an 8 dude as he is, it doesn't appeal to him to have nothing but steak on his plate. Let's have some carrots.
Right.
Let's have some green beans, as well as a well-paired wine.
Yes.
Of like there's balance to it, and he doesn't gorge himself when he eats it. He takes a bite and savors it.
Yes. And there's that wonderful scene where Frank surprises him with the strawberries, right? He had gotten the seeds from Joel and Tess to grow the strawberries and, had kind of kept it hidden from him and takes it over there. And again, to your point, this tough guy who enjoys, shooting zombies, is just like a child, when he sees these. Yeah, he does giggle and just, is so touched by, and they have this tender moment between them as they eat these strawberries. So yeah, it's that just this appreciation for these kind of simple things related to the preserving domain is what it comes down to.
And this is something I've seen with my preserving partner and other preservers that I know, is if you go out for dinner with them, that is one of their favorite things.
Yeah, say more
It's
about
like
that.
looking through the whole menu and really imagining, like looking at the menu online before we get to the restaurant, much less then looking at it again when we get to the restaurant. And
Right.
sometimes literally talking themselves through it. What do I want?
Yes.
And you can see them envisioning the flavor of this. Or maybe this. Or maybe,
Yes.
it's a shame I've only got enough appetite for one meal because I want all of these things. And then when it comes, like one of two things, which is, oh, this is delicious. Or, I kind of wish I got that other thing. We're going to have to come back.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it sounds like my wife. She used to steal menus from restaurants, because she just loved the idea of a menu so much, that she's like, wow, I mean, I can't eat all this, but at least I can think about it when I go home. Right? One of the, we didn't talk about this in the Navigating 8 episode, but when we think about the instinctual biases, we talk about this internal dissonance that's happening in preservers, this kind of wrestling and flipping back and forth between being conservative with our use of resources and supplies and all this other sort of stuff versus indulging ourselves in something, right? So there's this, evolutionary benefit of saving our resources, right, for a tougher time, storing nuts for the winter. And there's this evolutionary benefit of indulging in things when we have the opportunity, because who knows how long this, dead rabbit's going to last, so I better eat it now and enjoy it. And you can see this in this character as well, right? There's always this balance of, wanting to enjoy the meals and enjoy the wine. I kept thinking, man, it's 20 years later and he's still pulling out a bottle of Beaujolais. How much wine did he get from that place? Or where's he get, that sort of thing. But
yeah.
So you have to, get this balance of, do I use it now? Do I save it for later? And, so that was on display. The other thing we see is a contradiction, right? So there's this, and that's an outward expression of this dissonance in a way. And so what we see in preservers is sometimes they can be exceptionally nurturing, right? Caring for other people, wanting to take care of them in the same way that they would want to be taken care of. But when they're feeling a sense of scarcity, they become very selfish, right? Don't touch my pie, right? I mean, if it's the last piece, you better keep your hand away. You're going to lose some fingers, right? But if I got a whole pie, here, have a piece. Well, I want you to taste this pie, right? So, and again, we see this with Bill, this tender, nurturing generosity at certain points mixed with this, whoa, time out here. This is mine. Don't you touch it sort of quality.
That's his initial interaction with Frank.
Yes.
Of like, be gone.
Yes.
You've just established that you haven't eaten in 2 days. I don't care. Because if I feed you, every tramp you talk to is going to come here looking for a free lunch.
That's right. Yeah.
Before he changes his mind.
Yeah.
So we see that contradiction playing out in real time. We see him change his mind in that moment.
Yeah.
But that initial impulse is, get out of here. I've only got so much stuff. And he's got a lot of stuff.
Right. It's, you use the word tramp, which was the word that he used. He said, if I feed you, then you're going to go and tell, and every tramp is going to come along here. And Frank's response is, don't worry, I won't tell any tramps or hobos or vagabonds. And I was recently wrestling with this question because, it was Halloween a couple of weeks ago. And, I was thinking back as a kid and, my mother was not big on Halloween costumes. So pretty much every year we would be what were then called hobos, right? Where, we'd wear ratty old clothes and she would take, she would burn some cork, and rub it on our face to look like dirt. And we would go out as hobos. And I'm thinking, yeah, you can't do that anymore, right? So what would they, what would you call that? Anyway, it's,
Did you have the bundle on a stick?
Exactly, right? That's what it was, a bandana with some newspaper wrap, inside, crumpled up and all that stuff, So, yeah. So anyway, so I love that kind of little poke at the terminology there and the, the archaicness of the term hobo.
Another moment where we see that contradiction is the moment you mentioned earlier when Frank reveals he's been cultivating strawberries and that he traded the seeds. What did he trade for those seeds? one of Bill's guns.
Oh,
and as delighted as Bill is, he's like, which one? Like he's not happy about it. A small one.
One of the small ones.
Okay, I'll forgive you for that. Same with just how off-put he is when he finds out that Frank has been communicating with somebody over the radio.
Yes.
And then invited them. You what?
Yes.
He yells at, and as you described before, his energy when they're hosting them is very suspicious. It's like,
yes,
who are you? Because I've brought you into my domain, and this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because I have no illusions about how much danger there is lurking out there and how many people would happily come and take everything that I've gathered and built and maintained. Yeah.
At the heart of this episode is a love story, right? And it's not the kind of love story you're used to seeing, right? Post-apocalyptic, love relationship between two men. And, and in particularly with the Bill character, going against type, we'll say, right, in this, or at least going against stereotype in this relationship.
You see the "Don't Tread on Me" flag
yes.
in the background of one of his scenes.
Yes.
Like he is as far right as you can get.
Yes, yes. And for me, the important point about this is that very often in the Enneagram world and Enneagram literature, people would look at a story like this and think about the one-to-one subtype, right? They would start thinking, oh, that's a sexual or one-to-one character because of this intensity of the connection between these two, right? And what I find in the Enneagram world is that very often people who are preservers get misidentified as, quote, one-to-one types because the primary relationship is so important to them. But it's something different. Again, when we talk about transmitters and we look at relationships among transmitters, it's very different, right? It's the Wolf of Wall Street, right? The relationship between Leonardo DiCaprio and Margot Robbie, right? That volatility and that drama and everything, right? That's two transmitters in a relationship. Preservers in a relationship have this deep need for a bond, and it comes from a place of security very often, right? A feeling of well-being. And I don't want to diminish the love and the romantic attraction that's there, because there is a lot of that between these two, but it's that I feel safe with you. I feel, connected to you and therefore feel okay. And with the preserving 8, it's I need that person who makes me feel safe, but I also have the responsibility of protecting. Okay. But I'm protecting because it makes me feel safe as well, right? So these both things are existing at the same time. But I want to point that out as something really important to notice here and to understand about the preserving domain, is that one-on-one relationship is very much a preserving thing in this way rather than a transmitting thing.
Well, and in addition to that, I have found, being in a relationship with one, as well as speaking with different preservers, is preservers frequently express love with preserving things.
Yes.
So I will cook for you. I will provide you a good home. And there's a great scene midway through the episode where we've jumped ahead a number of years and raiders show up. Mm-hmm. Frank wakes up in the middle of the night and Bill is already on the street, rifle in hand, fighting them. Yeah. Shooting them through his fence, and he's rigged up these elaborate booby traps that are setting them on fire. And yet there are so many of them that it's a contested battle. And Bill takes a bullet, and Joel has to drag him inside and extract the bullet. And as he's doing it, Frank is saying, call Joel. He'll take care of you. In what might be his dying moment, that's what he's thinking of, is the safety and well-being of the man he loves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Frank who brings Bill back inside, and Bill tells Frank, call Joel. Right. So
right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have thought this through. I know what to do in this very situation, and I've already taken care of it. Right. It's kind of like the death box, right? It's like, if I die, don't worry. The will, my mother is a preserving 9, right? She's got everything. The will, the power of attorney, the grave site already has a tombstone with her name and date of birth on it and a dash, right? No, the rest just needs to be filled in, but everything's ready to go, right? And Bill's the same way. It's like, don't worry. Here's what you do. Okay. I'm prepared for this.
And being able to, early in the episode, being able to provide this guy with a shower.
Yeah.
Being able to give him new clothes.
Yeah.
Being able to give him a good meal and pour wine correctly in a nice glass.
Yeah.
And serve it on nice dishes. That's very much a preserver's expression of love.
Yeah.
Look at this abundance I have, and you are worth sharing it with.
Yeah. So very much an 8. Very much a preserver, and this is a good example of what a preserving 8 looks like. Okay, in the last episode we talked about Godfather 2, and we could have done a whole episode on the preserving 8 with Michael Corleone. But I think this was a nice way to get a different look at this, and we don't want to look at every 8 through the lens of the Godfather. So,
although
we could for sure. So before we move on to some of the the other category, I guess the next category is, what would this character have looked like if it was a navigating 8 or a transmitting 8? So why don't you go first? What would have happened if this guy was a navigating 8 instead of a preserving 8?
Well, for one thing, he probably wouldn't have been ready for societal collapse. He probably wouldn't have been preparing for years and decades for exactly this eventuality. So he probably wouldn't have the practical skills to thrive on his own. Yeah. And as a navigator, would have been inclined to find other people and to become in charge of that group of people. But that's happening in the world of The Last of Us. There are kind of communities here and there that have closed off. So I can picture a navigating 8 working his way into one of those.
Yeah. But you're right. He would not, a navigating 8 would not have had that fortress built unless he collaborated with a bunch of preserving 8s and other preservers to actually get it done, right? So I completely agree. Yeah, the navigating 8 probably would have been on that truck, getting shipped to the, the burial places. So how about a transmitting 8?
I think a transmitting 8, again, wouldn't have been satisfied to live this quiet life of living off the land and self-sufficiency. They probably would have become the head of a band of raiders or of a colony, very much like the transmitting 8 Negan in The Walking Dead. Mm-hmm. It's exactly what he does. Yeah. He becomes the head of a community of survivors and transmits himself onto it. They literally all say, "I am Negan." Mm. And he's the guy with the leather jacket and the baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire that he calls Lucille, and he kills people with it to demonstrate. That's a transmitting 8. Yeah. A villainous transmitting 8, but very much in that environment, a zombie apocalypse. What do? You fight like hell to survive, and you work your way to the top, and you imprint yourself even in this dead landscape.
Yeah. It's funny. That's the point where I stopped watching The Walking Dead. That first episode of that season, I just found the scene where he kills that guy with the bat to be just, for me, it's like, I'm done with this. I'm not a squeamish person, but it was just, it's not for. But so I'll have to take your word on that character because I didn't see the rest of it. But I get it, and I think you're absolutely right. So, all right, great. So let's talk about other characters. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Joel, who we both think is also a preserving 8, played by Pedro Pascal. How about Frank?
Frank, my best guess is 7.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we don't get anywhere near as much of a window into him. We have no idea who he was or how he lived before he came into Bill's yard. Mm-hmm. But maybe I'm kind of borrowing just the impression of his character in season 1 of The White Lotus as the manager of the hotel. He just seemed much more of a fun-loving kind of person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would go with 7 also. I didn't make the connection to The White Lotus with him. I did see that, but I didn't make the connection between the two people. Yeah, I went back and forth. At first, I'm thinking, is this a 2? And then, but it's not. It is a 7. And I also think it's probably a preserving 7. And the thing that got me thinking about that, there's that scene where he drags him outside and he wants to paint and refurbish the neighborhood, right? Because to this point, Bill had just been focused on his house. He didn't care that the other houses on the block within the compound looked like crap and were burned down, right? That's just, for him, this is not about aesthetics. This is just about practicality and, that sort of thing. And, but Frank, on the other hand, I want to walk out my door and see something nice, right? I want to see something pretty and comforting and homey. I want to create my own little Hallmark environment within the midst of this zombie apocalypse, right? I want to restore the cafe and the this and the boutique, and don't worry, just 2 places. Well, no, 3 places, and that, and then it goes on. And so it was always about, wanting to, even when he goes looking for the other people on the ham radio to find Joel and Tess, there's just this, there's something else happening out there that, I like it here. I'm happy in my nest, but, every once in a while I got to switch it up. I got to improve it. I got to make it nicer and that sort of thing. So, but also, again, a preserving approach to relationships. You talked about his condition later on when he was in the wheelchair, and he spent his time painting. And all of the paintings, as far as I could tell, were portraits of either him or Bill. Right? They weren't of puppies and rainbows and, these exciting things. But again, even with the preserving 7, there is this focus on the significant other. Okay? And so what did he spend his time doing? Painting pictures of the man he loved and of himself, just because that was his world.
And as far as the scene when they both end their lives, like that's about as good an end to a person's story as you can imagine in that environment. Like, again, this is an episode without voiceover, so we never find out Bill's inner monologue. But what I was imagining he's thinking in that scene is like, if I don't die now, how will I die?
Yeah.
Will I get some disease or injury or be killed by marauders or zombies? Like, this is a pretty damn good way to go. In the arms of the person I love after a good meal and a bottle of, again, he doesn't say this, but I'm imagining it, special wine that he's been saving for an occasion.
Right.
That I've loaded up with painkillers, so we're not even going to feel any pain, of like in our own home, which, by the way, is clean. So later in the episode, when Joel and Ellie arrive, Ellie's just astonished of like, it's not an extraordinary house, but it's extraordinary because in that world, it's extraordinary because it's clean.
Mm-hmm.
It's well maintained. So presumably they've both been doing housework this whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, we get to live and die in my castle.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a good end.
Yeah. He even says, Bill says to Frank, I'm old, I'm satisfied, and you were my purpose. And so it's like, my work is done, right? You were my work. You were my purpose. And if I don't have that, why am I here? What we see in people who are preserving, and again, particularly the preserving 8, as they mature and grow and age in life, the instinctual biases go through a focus as we mature. In the beginning, it's about me. It's about my preservation. Okay, I need to be safe and okay. And then we get to a certain stage in life where it's, I want the other to be okay. I want the people that I care about, the people that I love, my offspring to be okay. And then it kind of transcends beyond that, and it becomes more of a global concern. I want the world to be okay. All that, I want to see sustainability and so forth. In his place, there was nowhere to go, right? It's, my job is to preserve things, and I'm beyond the point where I'm just thinking I'm going to preserve myself. And if you're not here for me to preserve, there's no reason for me to be here.
Yeah, and to deliberately end his life that way is also a means of asserting control.
Yes. I'm going.
I kill me.
Yeah,
you don't kill me.
That's right. I'm going out on my terms. Yeah, that's great. I do want to call out to a piece of music in here when they cut to the scene where it's 10 years later and Frank is in the wheelchair and they're both getting older. There's a piece of music playing. Oh shoot, I wrote it down here. So it's On the Nature of Daylight by the Max Richter Orchestra. Just this beautiful piece of symphonic cello music, right? And multiple instruments in there, but the cello is the main one. And it's also used in the movie Arrival with
Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, yeah, thank you. And Forrest Whitaker and Jeremy Renner and some other folks. But wonderful, wonderful movie. But just a lovely piece of music. And I thought it was so well used in that scene, where just to establish this kind of melancholic tenderness between these two characters. All right, TJ, anything that we have left out that we should talk about regarding preserving the 8 or preserving 8?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just listing off a few other favorite preserving 8s that people can look up. One is the old man Parker, the dad in A Christmas Story, played by Darren McGavin.
Yeah.
We've got an episode where we talk about that. Clint Eastwood's character in Gran Torino, Walt Kowalski, get off my grass. Very handy.
Yes.
One of the ways he shows love is to mentor this Asian teenage boy and show him how to use tools and get him a job on a construction site. There's Jimmy, the Oliver Platt character on The Bear. He's the finance guy. He's running the whole thing. He's got his eye on the budget. Joy, played by Jennifer Lawrence in the movie Joy, invents a self-cleaning mop. And she's a single mom, and she takes care of her ex as well as her mom, her bedridden mom who watches soap operas all day. The Brad Pitt character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's a stunt performer. And practical, like he fixes the roof antenna at one point, as well as, he can take pain, and he's got a weight set outside of that trailer that he lives in. And my favorite preserving 8 of all is Ron Swanson, also played by Nick Offerman, who I think is probably a preserver in real life. His character in Parks and Recreation. And they borrowed certain elements of Nick Offerman's real life, like the fact that he's a woodworker, and gave that to his character. And there's some great episodes where he's rhapsodizing about his favorite steakhouse and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'll add to that, and we mentioned him in the last episode of when we talked about the Navigating 8, the De Niro character in Heat is a great example of a preserving 8. And again, somebody who's absolutely in charge, but extremely methodical, low-key, contained, restrained, all these sort of things. So a good example.
Not flashy.
Yes.
Yeah. Another quick thing to mention is the series creator of Last of Us, Craig Mazin. Another thing he worked on was the miniseries Chernobyl, which is about the nuclear meltdown in Chernobyl and the efforts to contain it. So again, very much a story about preserving. Not necessarily about preserving 8, but about preserving in general.
Yeah. Outstanding series. I was. It took me a while to get to Chernobyl. It had been out for a few years, but boy, oh boy, powerful stuff. So, all right. Good. All right. So here we are, folks, at the end of another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. Again, we're doing all 27 subtypes this season, and we've done the Navigating 8, the Preserving 8, and I think that means we've got to do the Transmitting 8 next. So we're not going to give it away who we're going to talk about for that one, so we'll have you be surprised, we hope. So, TJ, it's good to talk to you as always. Thanks for your insights on these movies, and we'll see you next time.
Always a pleasure.